Okay, hi everybody and welcome. My name is Christy DeCarolis and I'll be moderating this session, which is called Technical Thorns and Roses about a Sakai 11 upgrade. Before we get started, I just want to go over a couple things. The session is being recorded. You're going to receive an email announcement once the recordings are available. If you have any questions or comments during the session, please type them into the chat area, or if you have a microphone, you can ask your questions or make comments aloud. However, if you are using a microphone, please mute yourself if you're not speaking so we don't have any background noise. The presenter for this session is William Karavitas, and he is the team lead for development at Rutgers University's Office of Instructional and Research Technology. So if you want to get started, Will.
Oh, sounds good. Thanks, Christy. I'd just like to introduce myself. Again, as Christy said, I'm Will Karavitas. I'm the team lead for development at Rutgers University. And so what we'll be going over today is just kind of a Thorns and Roses session of our upgrade to Sakai 11. Currently, we're running Sakai 11, and we upgraded from, I guess you could say, Sakai 10.x. We weren't really at a specific release of 10 since we had the most up-to-date versions of Samigo, Test and Quizzes, Lesson Builder, and a few other tools. So while we did upgrade some tools completely, other tools, it was more of just a functional change. So what we'll be going over is how it went from the technical side. What was our plan? How did we approach the upgrade? Did we have any major problems going into the upgrade, during the upgrade, or after it? Other than major problems, what were some issues that we ran into afterwards? And then after that, what are some recurrent issues we're coming in to where we've been seeing? And yes, Neil, of course, what went well? So first, we'll get started with what was our plan. Normally, what we do every year is we have a day-long downtime each year at the end of August, at the end of our summer semester, that we dedicate to our Sakai upgrade. So that's everything from the systems, upgrading the virtual machines, the networks, the servers, all the way to upgrading Tomcat, Java, and the database itself. So while we typically use the entire second half of the spring semester and summer to do QA, what we really focus on before is really making sure all the hardware bits and all the core tools and high-level function changes work in Sakai a week or two out. Jeff, yes, we do host our own instance. We don't use AWS, Azure, DigitalOcean, or anything like that. We have our own set of virtual machines for the front ends, load balancers, and database. And so in those 1 or 2 weeks before, we, instead of focusing on QA, feature changes, bugs, about a month before that, we have a code freeze. And so we just have multiple people in our office, and from Christy's office and other offices at Rutgers, test out the larger scale features of Sakai. Due to the way Sakai is set up with its tools, and due to the great scripts that the community has, this is a really easy process. And so it just helps us make sure that we have all of our ideas together. And so this year, if I remember correctly, our downtime was August 20th. And so what we do is the week beforehand, or about a month beforehand, we have a message of the day on our front page saying, Sakai will be down for this day. Please let us know. About a week beforehand, we send out emails saying Sakai will be down, just warning you. And then, yep, Christy, thanks for clarifying that. So as just a quick aside, the other offices at Rutgers, the other instructional design teams, really, we wouldn't have been able to do QA without them. since while we have a student-led help desk and the students help us do the grunt work of QA, the other instructional designers really helped us with all the new functionality and functional changes within Sakai. So to go back to the downtime plan, and then as the downtime comes closer, we make sure we have a very out there message, making sure people know that Sakai will be down this coming Saturday. There is no availability. We'll let you know when it's up. And one of the new features in Sakai 11 that I was extremely excited for, and I think it's a great idea, was actually the new PA system. So now instead of having a MOT-D up or message of the day that users may or may not see, instead of spamming people with emails that they'll probably ignore anyway, we can use that PA system to say a month out, they'll only see it once when they log in. Guess what? Sakai is going to be down in a month, just letting you know. A week ahead of time, we could put a banner message up saying Sakai will be down in a week, just letting you know, please contact here for more information. So this new PA system is going to really help us with letting users know about downtime, emergency changes, or even university-wide emergencies. And so when we get to the downtime, the day before, what we typically do is we worked out a plan of how we were going to upgrade everything: the systems, the virtual machines, the code, and the databases. So before we even got to the upgrade, the way we approached this this upgrade was we already upgraded our test and dev servers to Java and Tomcat 8 for the entire QA process. We use a fork of MySQL called MariaDB, and we upgraded that to the most recent version. So we did all of our testing on the exact versions that we'd be using in production. And this helps us get used to not only the differences in the new frameworks and languages, but helps us debug and almost get used to the more subtle differences in how they handle connections or display different files or download different files. And on the code side, what we had was we would have a specific branch that was just our Sakai 11 code that we were working on. And the way we approached that was to just take the community code, download it, make a new branch with that, and then put our Rucker-specific changes on top of that. There's some code that we have that the community doesn't have, and now that may be that the community may not have taken it yet, or they're still working on it, or it may be Rucker-specific code. And that's another way that the community and the other instructional designers at Rutgers really helped, since anyone can follow a QA script, but when we made Rucker-specific changes, we really needed people that were really familiar with the system to help us test all of those features and make sure they still acted the same. And again, while the instructional designers and our entire team helped with the QA process and the Rucker-specific changes, the community QA scripts that they have really helped us make sure that we tested almost every single piece of functionality. The QA scripts weren't just, okay, make sure assignments work, or okay, make sure students can submit tests and quizzes. The community QA scripts had, okay, test that a student can submit a quiz while using a due date, while using auto submit. Okay, now test that while using auto submit, but then have a different due date. So they were very meticulous in how we tested and QA'd all of the different tools. And so then when we got to the point where Sakai 11 was done, and we were confident that, okay, this is the code we'll be working on and be releasing. We had a code freeze about a month before the actual merge. The test and QA scripts should be available to the community. I'll double check that they were with Neil later, and if possible, I'll see if we can get our QA scripts released to the community too. That'll be, I'll see if I can put it into the chat later today or send it out as an email blast. Yeah, one of the, just to bring it back to QA, one of the reasons the QA scripts were so useful is that because of the breadth of options that Sakai has, it's really important to test every single option, since one department may use a specific feature, but no other department uses that. These QA scripts are made in a way that we almost can test every single type of feature, every single relationship between every single other feature. So it really helps us get through all of the different processes. So if you can type in, if you would prefer what I'm thinking is I'll either send it out in an email or I'll upload it to Dropbox or OneDrive and then share that link so everyone can take a look at it. So let me know what you think, how you'd like shared. So to go back to the code real quick.
Well, real quick.
Oh, yep, go ahead.
I just, I thought maybe if you could share a link for the page where you share slides in the conference site.
Okay, no problem.
And then also, did you see Jennifer's question about did the help desk student have?
Oh, okay. Missed that. Let me take a look at that. Did help desk students have access as instructors to test or student side only? So I'll finish up my code question, and then that'll lead directly into that Jennifer's question. So the way we approach our code is we would take a specific point in time, say it could be June 15th, or once there is a stable Sakai merge. Eric, I'm sorry that you can't use Dropbox. I feel bad for you. So what I'll do is I'll try and package it in OneDrive, or maybe just share it out. Okay, no problem. I'll put it in multiple links so everyone can share it. And so that, and maybe instead of a date, we have, okay, any code up to the time they release Sakai 11.0, we will use all of that code up to that date, and we won't put in any more changes. It doesn't matter if it's a new feature that people want. The only time we'll put in new code is if it's a very serious security or performance fix. So then once all that code is merged and tested and QA'd, we will package that and merge that into our master branch that is production ready. And so this will lead right into Jennifer's question. So we really have almost, you could say, 2.5 tiers of testing. We have our test branch that we can change the code whenever we want, and it runs off a copy of the production database. So about every other month or at the end of every semester, we copy all the data from the production database and put that onto our test database. So not only do we have up-to-date information, but we have all of the changes that people have been making, so it's easier to test code instead of testing it on live data. But then we also have a production level testing environment where we have a front end that we can control what code's on it, but it's connected to a live version of the database. So in case there's any sort of display changes we need to check or functionality changes that don't change data, we can test those on the live production data that users use so we can see how things work. Let me check over the chat real quick. Not necessarily scary, Neil. So for our test database, that is completely separate. But then we have that production level testing environment that only the help desk students instructors that we give them access to and developers have access to. And the only changes we'll put on that pre-merge are display level changes such as CSS or JavaScript changes. Once we go through with the merge and the code, the data is completely the same, all the logic did the same, as we go through the semester and we have bugs or feature requests that need live data, then we'll do a deploy on that server that allows us to test that out. We're currently moving towards or trying to move towards a system where each week the production and test database sync up so we wouldn't have to do that. Liang, so you mean while you're developing Sakai, you're using a copy of the production database, which is live. We're only using a copy of that production database to test display level changes. So again, if it's CSS or JavaScript, and we want to make sure it works with the data that users have been using, that's what we'll do. We only do changes on that once the merge is complete. So the test database is a copy, but there is a live production for select people that we only do select sort of tests on. Say there's a fix for testing quizzes or gradebook and the logic is the same. I mean, the data is the same, but we need to test a certain piece of logic. We'll do a light test on that just to make sure that everything matches up. Once the merge is complete and the logic is the same up to a certain level from test, development, and what's in production, then we're a little more stringent on what can be tested in that environment. And so, Jennifer, to answer the other part of your question, in our test environment, our students in the help desk and our QA people have instructor and administrator level access. And we have a set of test rosters that we can use to test how courses get their members and participants. We can create sites, test sites, duplicate sites. So it's not that we're almost held up on testing because of permissions. Since a lot of people seem to be interested on the test and live database, I'll reserve some time at the end of it to go over that more in depth. So to go on, so for the actual upgrade, luckily the community provides a really great workup on not just theory behind the changes. They also provide all of the MySQL statements that you have to execute to get Sakai up and running from version to version. So if you were going to just create an instance of Sakai 11, you could just run Sakai and it'd be working. But if you upgrade Sakai from, say, 10.4 to Sakai 11, there are a few scripts that you manually have to run from 10.4 to 10.7, 10.7 to 11, Sakai 11 to Sakai 11.1 to make sure that everything is up to date. And so before that, we tested these scripts out on our test environment to see how long they would take. And the process itself to run all the scripts took 1 to 2 hours. And that's due to the fact of how much data we have. And also due to the nature of some of the scripts, we could only run 1 or 2 of them at a time. So some scripts we could run 5 or 6 at a time. But for the more heavy ones, you can only run 1 or 2 at a time. So the scripts themselves, once we brought the system down to the users and finished upgrading the physical servers themselves, we ran the database scripts on our production server, and that took around closer to 2 hours just to run the update scripts. So since we already were running our test environment on Java and Tomcat 8, all we really needed to do on the front end side was to just change our links on our deploy scripts from Tomcat 7 to Tomcat 8, and then deploy the new code. That was a very simple process. since at this point the upgraded Sakai 11 code was our master production branch, all we had to do was say, okay, deploy the new code. So once we went through each server, we would deploy the new Sakai 11 code on each server. And then as we went through the process, we would check our logs to double check if there were any specific errors or anything didn't start. And due to the fact that we ran through a few test deploys in the weeks beforehand, we didn't run into any problems. So once all of the front ends were deployed and we had it running, we would open up a front end so that specific people could test out a quick sanity test of it. Is it up and running? Can you log in? Can you enter a site? Can you create a site? And once we were fairly confident that it was finished and could handle everything, we would, I guess you would say, open Sakai back up to Rutgers around, if I remember correctly, is around 12 or 1 o'clock. So Sakai itself was down for about 6 hours, but really 2 hours of that time was just for database script changes and upgrades. Another 2 hours was double checking all of our Java and Tomcat links, the code, and deploying it on the servers. And then the rest of that time, so around another 2-3 hours, was just double checking everything. So once Sakai was back up around 12 or 1 o'clock, we used the great new PA system to say, welcome to the new Sakai. We linked them to a blog post about the incoming changes that they've been aware of and that we've been releasing. And so in the back end, while everything's being upgraded, we worked with our sysadmin to make a fully complete snapshot of Sakai, of our past Sakai, just in case things broke. Once we brought the database down, we took a full snapshot of it before we made any changes. Same with our front ends and code. So just in case life happens and we're halfway through the process and realize there's a serious bug and we need to back out of it, we can bring Sakai 10 back up in around 10-15 minutes and then work on Sakai 11 in the back end. Luckily, we didn't have any of these problems. So now I'll go over the issues we found afterwards. And a lot of these really weren't with Sakai, the code itself, but just some things we've noticed that users had issues with. One thing we didn't double check was our LTI tools. So when we went through our upgrade scripts and our code merges, we accidentally forgot the secret key, password, and username for a few LTI tools, such as Turnitin, so that when we did our initial deploy, we noticed Turnitin wasn't available. So we had to do another deploy later that night, which was simply just putting the secret key, the username and password back into our configuration files. One thing we noticed with our database configuration was that we set the amount of connections that each front end, each server could have to the database too low. And because of the beginning of the semester, you can imagine thousands of users logging in at the same time, the servers became a little overloaded. So we needed to increase those. And that's more of a technical issue that we're just trying to almost find a best practice for. And one thing that the next one I think Christy could definitely allude to was just users dealing with the new design. As you can see, the community did a great job on the new skin. Sakai looks like it really belongs on the internet, on the World Wide Web in 2016. It's colorful, it's more fluid, it follows design that you've seen. So while it's updated, it's upgraded, it's faster, it's smoother. A lot of users just weren't used to the new design, even though we've sent them screenshots beforehand, and we had a weekly sort of thread about upcoming changes. A lot of the issues we had were really just helping users get through the new process. Leanne, I'll definitely I'll put in my email real quick, and I'll see if I can send you our configuration changes and our problems. So currently, the only real issue we've had is one with Turnitin, that because of the way the Turnitin API changed, we had to sort of change the way Turnitin was interfaced with assignments. And so that's been one of the problems and issues we've been going back and forth with Turnitin and how it handles grades and submissions. Okay, Jeff, can you talk a little bit about your education process for your users ahead of time, both from instructors and student point of view? Okay, I'll go over that right after I'm finished up with this slide and the next.
Well, I can also provide input on that. If you
definitely, yeah, because as Christy could definitely allude to, I handled it mainly on a technical development point of view, but Christy's group and our instructional design group really were the forefront of, I don't want to say dealing with the professors and users, but really educating them on the incoming changes. So we'll go over that in a few minutes. So one of the things we've noticed, and it's less of a technical issue and more of a, I guess you would say, design issue, is since a lot of tools, rightly so, have been moving to Turnitin, what we've been noticing is that if a LTI tool goes down and there's nothing we can do about it, if it's completely initial on their side, users will still think it's a problem with our instance of Sakai. There was an issue with Kaltura recently, and some of the videos weren't working. Even though we had multiple users calling in saying that, oh my God, why isn't Kaltura working? What did you guys do? What did you change? When are you going to be able to fix it? There's nothing we could do on our end, since it was just a link to the tool and there's an issue on their side. So we've been having to weigh how we handle explaining issues with LTI tools, since there's really nothing we can do about it, and all we can do is provide feedback and when it may be back up. So Jeff and Adam, I'll go over those two issues right after the last slide. So one of the things, some of the wishes we had, and this is less community and more about our process, is I wish there could have been more testing on some of the core tools. And I'm not saying, okay, double check this tool works. I'm saying that due to the huge amount of changes that came into some of the tools, I would have liked more code testing, but also a wider range of users testing the core tool. So the developers testing it, professors testing it, instructional designers testing it, just so we could deal with less problems as the QA process continues. One of the issues we came up with, since we currently run Gradebook 1 and 2, and we're currently running Gradebook NG, was that we have one of our student developers, all this time is dealt with developing feature parity between the different gradebooks. So we've been taking all the different features from Gradebook. While the community has been focusing on Gradebook 1, we have enough users that use enough features in Gradebook 2 that they need those features in Gradebook NG. So we've been focusing a lot of our time on feature parity studies and taking those features from Gradebook 1 and 2 into Gradebook NG. The community's done amazing work on Gradebook NG, but we have enough, as I said, users on Gradebook 2 that we need to put in a few more features before we can completely end of life Gradebook 1 and 2. And one of the things that happened this year is due to the release schedule, the release that we worked on was a little higher up in the schedule that we would have liked. And that's just due to the amount of changes that the community was coming in for with Morpheus and Gradebook NG. And that's also partially due to our fact that Rutgers has typically been on the bleeding edge of Sakai. So one thing I may change for the next time is maybe have a more stringent schedule on how we test releases. So that's really what I have. What I'll be going over now is the issue and the questions and comments that we had in chat. At first, I'll just see what Neil said, and Neil, no problem. It's great that's what someone that we are on the bleeding edge, so we can figure out the issues really quickly, and it's been really useful for the community and Rutgers users, so that we can get all these issues figured out right away instead of down the road. Okay, and then first I'll go over, Jeff, what you said about, can you talk a little bit about the education process for our users ahead of the time? So in the months leading up to the deploy, we sort of had blog posts about all the upcoming changes from a design point of view, what the physical design differences through the color and clicks, all the way from to blog posts about why we have 3 grade books. Hey, you used to do this way. Guess what? 90% of that is the same, but here are some incoming changes. So it was more of about a push-based system, letting the users know what's changing, why it's changing, how we're changing it. And then we also gave them a sort of, if they wanted to, seminars or one-on-one talks so they could preview some of the tools. Christy, if you have some an instructional design point of view, any stories or points you'd like to make, please come in at any moment.
So yeah, I mean, I do have a couple of things. So just to clarify, I'm an instructional designer at Rutgers Camden, a different campus that Will is at. Will's team has their own instructional designers as well. So we kind of did our own thing down here. And one thing I thought that was really helpful, and I think Will, I think the instructional designers in your group did this too, is at the beginning of the semester that we were first running Sakai 11, we had really fast, like half-hour webinars about like what's new in Sakai 11, and those were pretty popular to just quickly kind of go over, here are the changes, and here's what you should be looking out for. And I really felt like a lot of people kind of got a little bit freaked out by they thought more changed than actually had changed.
Oh, definitely.
Those webinars, I felt like those webinars really helped them decipher what was actually changed in Sakai. And my group in our campus, we also put a quick website together, or web page together, and sent that to some of our faculty as well to kind of give them a heads up on what was coming. So I'm pasting the link to that in the chat if you want to check that out. You know, you can feel free to steal any of that. And it went over all of the changes except the changes to lessons. We didn't really address those as much because we have very specific users using lessons. It's not used by everybody else as much as the other tools are. So these were held, Sean asked, were these What's New seminars held before or after the deployment? We held them, so this went out, Sakai 11 was launched, I want to say 2 weeks before the semester started this fall. And we held them after the deployment. So we were working, when I was giving the webinar, I was working in the live version of Sakai that people could access.
And just to allude to what Christy said, is one of the key things and one of the great things about the community is that since we have members of the community from all the different areas of Sakai usage, from code monkeys to professors that can't spell CSS, this whole range of users really allows the community to communicate problems, I think, clearly between everyone. If you've ever had a problem with Sakai from a functional point of view, from trying to put in a new feature, you really have to and really should get involved with the email lists, and because they're so responsive. If we didn't have the email list, then a lot of the work we've done really wouldn't have been possible, because we have all those different minds working on Sakai. And again, I'll put in my email just again. If you have any other questions about our process or how things went technically or from a professor point of view, please feel free to email me. And so then what next is, so the issue with, the email lists, Neil, would you be able to paste in those email lists, or is there, or maybe a community link of the different ones, since I'm only used to the user and Sakai devs list? Awesome, thanks. So since we have around 4 minutes left, I'll finish up the Turnitin and the Turnitin issues, and the idea, it seems to be, of LTI versus core tools. So Turnitin went from, the company themselves changed how you interface with their services, and it went from a strict, what's called a REST call, you send them information. They sort of locked that down, and Oxford's done some great work on getting an LTI implementation of Turnitin working. And so we've been working on getting that fully functional with our version of assignments and gradebook. One of the more common issues we've seen, and that we're trying to sort of figure out, is we've seen a few issues linking assignments, tests, and quizzes with gradebook, but we're pretty sure that that's an issue with maybe some code conflicts we've seen on our end rather than the community code themselves. And then I'll just end it with what I've kind of seen. Someone made a comment before of, who is it? I think it was Jennifer saying, yep, one thing down, everything must be broken. So imagine it this way. If you use Kaltura, you just have a link to Kaltura that is hosting everything. As far as a user is concerned, if Kaltura is down, it's Sakai's fault. So we've been trying to deal with a bit of blowback about, while it's great that LTI tools have become active, you have to almost deal with users thinking that if an LTI tool is down, is it a problem with the tool itself, or is it a problem with the platform Sakai itself? So that's really all I have. If anyone has any questions, you can post it in the chat, or if you please feel free to email Christy or me, and we'll be happy to respond to any more questions you have about the technical parts of the upgrade process, the more user or functional based parts, how we went through the process, if you need a hand deciphering anything, or if you just have any comments or would like to be included. Again, just to put in what Neil just said, the community is extremely receptive and gives lots of good feedback if you post anything to the email lists or the Slack channel. It could be simple, hey, I'm trying to do X, but it's not helping. And then someone could say, oh yeah, just type this in instead. Or you may be the next person to start the next great conversation that may start the next great assignments feature. So really feel free to always comment or ask questions on those threads, and someone will most likely get back to you. Nice, Neil, thanks. So that's all I have. Christy, if you have anything else, like to end on anything, I'm good on my end.
Nope, thanks, Will. So I will end the recording of this session, and I will head on to the next questions then.
Sounds good to me. And again, everyone feel free to email us if you have any continuing questions or comments. We'll be more than happy to reply to anyone.